Hey guys, what's up? JP and Adam here. We're going to be talking to you a little bit about the rule set that we're going to be using for roleplay, balance of power, as well as, how does combat work? What does the roles mean? All that type of stuff. Me and Adam were talking, and we kind of want that sense of when you play D&D, and we've both said this before, when you play Dungeons and Dragons, everyone knows that, a 20 on a dice roll is really good and a 1 is really bad. So we're trying to get both ourselves and also the community familiarized with how the whole rule set works, so that when something happens, when a good dice roll occurs, that you guys can be just as excited as we are, rather than everyone kind of being like, what does that mean? Is that a good thing? I mean, he's got 2 of these objects. What does that mean? So that's kind of the point of this video. But Adam, why don't you go ahead and introduce the rule set? Because I know we've used, for Age of Rebellion, we used the Age of Rebellion rule set, right? Is that what we're going to be using here?
Yeah, so there's 3 different core rule books for this system. They're all made by the same company. They all run on basically the same fundamental mechanics and dice. But yeah, there's 3 different ones. There's Edge of Empire, which is sort of Han and Chewie and smugglers and bounty hunters. There's Force and Destiny, which is Jedi, and then there's one we're going to be using primarily, which is Age of Rebellion. And thankfully, they're pretty cross-compatible, so we might steal bits and pieces from the other 2, but Age of Rebellion is going to be our main focus, because the story in Force and Destiny is going to be about what happened after the second Death Star blew up and how the rebellion becomes the New Republic.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so the thing that the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games are pretty much known for, 9 times out of 10 when I say, oh, we're playing the Fantasy Flight rule set, people say, oh, that's the one with the weird dice. And if you watched Age of Rebellion, you saw a lot of strange colors and symbols on the screen every time somebody rolled. So what we want to do is, kind of put some context to those rolls, so that if you're not familiar with the rules, you can take a look and you'll understand kind of what it means when we get these weird dice pools going in the game.
Cool. Well, let's start off with kind of stats and how do they work in this system, because I think that's kind of the bread and butter of any tabletop RPG is, what's the strength, charisma, dex, blah blah blah. Like, what is that in this rule set?
Yeah, so this is a great thing, a great way to kind of get an idea of what the characters are good at, just as a baseline. You can look at what this game calls their characteristics. This is like in D&D, their dexterity, strength, intelligence, that sort of thing. The 6 stats, the characteristics in this game, are your character's brawn, which is how tough you are, basically. Your agility, which is hand-eye coordination, how fast the character is. Your intellect, which is how much the character knows. This is the droid stat. It's how much you know about the world. Cunning, which is kind of how clever you are, how quick thinking your character is. And it's often used for manipulating NPCs. There's your willpower, which is useful for situations where your character is being manipulated mentally by a charismatic character or by the Force. And then there's your presence, which is your strength of personality. This is for rebel commanders and for bossing people around. So those 6 stats build the kind of base of your character, and then they're modified by your character's skills. So this game is one of those games that has like a long, extensive skill list. Basically anything you saw any character do in any Star Wars piece of media, there's a skill for it. Things like astrogation, lightsaber combat, leadership, mechanics, pretty much anything you're going to want to do, the characters have a skill for it. And the skills allow you to upgrade your existing capabilities. So if you have a high brawn, that means you have a natural talent for being tough and fierce. But if you have a high lightsaber skill, you might be able to use that strength to more effect when you're using lightsabers. It modifies the dice pool that you're building when you try to accomplish something.
I guess the other important thing too is dice rolls, right? Because most of how are stats determined in this game? Is that from the class, or do we roll our stats just like you would in any other game?
So when you're making a character in this game, it's a baseline that starts based on your character's species, and then you get a certain number of points to build on those with skills. There's also talents that your character can get based on your character's career and specialization.
Gotcha. Well, let's jump into the dice rolls and what do they mean? Because I think that's probably the one thing that you mentioned, it where you look at this rule set and it's just got a bunch of funky looking dice. Back when we played Age of Rebellion, there was still a lot of times where the cast would just have to be like, Adam, what does this mean? Because we didn't know what those dice meant. And no one really watching did unless they had played before. So what do the dice rolls mean?
Yeah, looking back at the Age of Rebellion game in Roll20, I was looking at the chat log, and it's all green triangles and purple triangles and red things and strange symbols. And yeah, it can be a little daunting if you've never played the game or read the rule set before. So hopefully we'll be able to kind of lay it out for you. So unlike a game like Stars Without Number, which we're playing in Swansong, you're not rolling against a particular difficulty number when you roll. So your stats aren't based on adding or subtracting from a pool. What you do is you accumulate a bunch of different dice depending on your character's characteristics, first of all, whether or not you're skilled at what you're doing, and whether or not there are any advantages to the situation. And then to that pool, you're going to add difficulty dice based on what I tell you the difficulty of the situation is. And that can be based on, say, if you're firing a weapon, how far away from your target you are, if you're being shot at by other characters, if the dark side has an influence on your action, it might make it more difficult for you to act. And with all of those together, you're going to assemble a pool of dice. Now, there are 3 types of dice on either side, the good and bad side of your roll. There are advantage dice or boost dice. These are, if you're playing at a table, they're the little blue D6s. Those represent opportunities your character has to get an edge in a situation. This might be you took some extra time aiming, or you know a secret about something you're trying to manipulate. They can grant you boost dice. Now, you're not going to succeed with just boost dice alone. That's what ability dice are for. Ability dice are the little green diamonds. They're 8-sided dice. Ability dice are the basis of most of your pools, and they come from your characteristics. So a character with 4 brawn, like we were talking about before, they're going to start with 4 of those green dice. That's sort of the meat and potatoes of your character's benefit for that roll. And then for each point in a skill that you have, you're going to upgrade one of those green dice to a proficiency die. Now, a proficiency die is a little yellow D12, and these are the only dice that have the triumph symbol on them. I'll talk about the symbols a bit more in just a second, but the triumph symbol is your crit. This one is it looks like a little lightsaber with a circle around it, and that's when you know you've done something right. If you see a triumph roll, now you can only get those from proficiency dice. So proficiency dice will come from having skills.
So is that kind of the equivalent of a 20 then?
Yeah,
or close to it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's the way that your character triggers crits
Gotcha.
in a combat roll. So you'll be looking for those when you make those attack rolls. So you'll have on the one side, you'll have your ability dice, you'll have the upgrades to your proficiency dice, and you'll have your boost dice. And then I'm going to be telling you what negative stuff to add. And those are pretty much the mirror equivalent on the bad side. So setback dice, these are little black D6s. These often represent problems or minor obstacles. So you're being shot at and it's hard to pop your head out of cover. You're trying to intimidate an Imperial officer in a room full of stormtroopers. These are kind of situational disadvantages your character might have. Then you're also going to add in difficulty dice. These are the purple D8s. They basically match the ability dice, but on the negative side. They represent just how difficult a thing is. So this is sort of like the DC or the armor class or the target number for other systems. If I say you've only got 1 difficulty die to add, you know that's going to be a pretty easy thing to do. But if I'm saying add 5, that's a much harder task to accomplish.
Sure.
And in the same way proficiency dice upgrade your ability dice, challenge dice are the upgraded version of difficulty dice. And challenge dice carry the despair symbol. The despair symbol is like a critical fumble. This is the one. It looks like a little dark-sided looking triangle with a circle around it.
Gotcha.
If you see that one come up, that means something real bad has happened. And it essentially works as a crit for me, the GM. I can say something really bad that happened to you. I can represent equipment damage, a crit against you, maybe your blaster explodes. Really bad things you don't want happening to you. So you'll have a pool of dice that'll vary in size depending on how complex the action is. And when you roll, the symbols on the dice will cancel each other out, and whatever you have left over is how successful you were. So the symbols on the dice come from the good or bad dice, and they're going to look like pretty confusing unless you know what you're rolling for. After the first couple of sessions, we'll get it sorted out. But a success, this is the one that's sort of the most important. It's a little explosion. And this is a symbol that's critical for determining whether your skill check succeeds or fails. You have to have successes or you don't get what you want. It's plain and simple.
Sure.
There's also advantage, and this is a little set of wings with a star in it. These are opportunities for positive consequences or additional side effects. You might not get these, but if you do, they can help either the current action that you're on, or they can help somebody else taking an action later. These are situational advantages that come up. And in combat, these are used for triggering the special abilities of your weapon. So if you're wielding a lightsaber or a stun weapon and you want to activate some of its special abilities like stunning or being able to cut through an enemy's weapon, you'll need a certain number of advantage results to be able to trigger that special effect. It's bonus stuff on top of your successes.
Okay. I think one thing that would actually help is if we jumped into Roll20 and just made up some rolls and had people kind of do that. So let's go ahead and jump over to that. All right, so we've jumped over into Roll20 just to run through some, I guess, standard rolls. So where should we start? Like, what? I guess initiative. Do you want to do a combat round? Where do you think we should start?
Well, let's just take a look at how a basic skill roll might be made.
Okay.
You can see on your let's take a look at athletics. Athletics is a skill that this character is pretty good at.
Sure.
So you can see across from athletics, you've got your proficiency die and the 3 dice that you're going to be adding on top of that. And those 4 dice there come from the fact that you have 4 brawn and 1 rank in athletics. So there's 1 upgrade. If you move the ranks up and down, it'll increase or decrease the number of proficiency dice that you have. Yeah, you can see that there. The next spot to that where it says dice, this is going to be where once I've told you what negative dice to add, you'll be typing those in. You can also use the dice pool above to add dice to any roll that you're making. You can see that section there. Some sliders for adding disadvantage dice and additional dice there.
Sure.
And once that pool is set, let's give you a 2 difficulty and 1 disadvantage.
Okay, so how would I type that in? Just
yeah, so you can either type it in after the action using the little legend next to dice. So for adding black dice, it would be 2 BLK and then a space and 2P, for example.
Okay, and then where did you say the dice pool was?
Just above your characteristics, if you roll up, there's an area that says dice pool, and it's got all different dice with zeros. So you can also add to this as well. Whatever's in your dice pool will automatically get added to whatever roll you make.
Gotcha. So I can put 2 there, and then what did 2P stand for? That was 2.
Let's do two purple dice and a couple of black dice.
Okay, I'll just put 3 black dice there.
Sure. Yeah. So this is going to be a tricky roll, but you've got a proficiency die, so you got a chance there. So then you can click on the D20 next to your athletics roll.
Okay.
See that on the corner?
All right.
And there you go.
So I guess walk me through this.
Sure. So this is a fairly straightforward roll because you have 2 sets of symbols that don't cancel each other out. You got 5 successes, and you have 2 of the disadvantage symbols, 2 threats. So what this means is that in this case, you're going to get the thing that you were trying to get. And by a long shot, if you were, say, trying to run to catch someone or jumping across a gap, all you really need is that 1 success symbol, but having all those extras means that this is a particularly successful action. So maybe you not only, jumped from rooftop to rooftop, but you hit the ground, you did a roll, and you ended up getting closer to the person you were chasing. However, the addition of those 2 threat symbols means that something bad happened in the process, even though you got what you wanted. So you might have dropped your bag as you were jumping, or you twisted your ankle and maybe you took some strain in the process. For every action, the GM and the players have a table of things they can spend these on mechanically, so gaining strain back, taking strain damage, and those are easy to just rely on in those situations, but it's also a way for us to know narratively what happened. There's a lot that gets told to us in a single die roll.
Sure.
Now, if you'd had any triangles that showed up in that roll, you can see on the dice pool above, there's a couple of negative symbols. You can see the triangles that appear there. There's also an advantage roll, ability advantage that showed up there. Those cancel each other out. So the triangles cancel successes, and threat cancels advantage. So if you have those, the system will automatically just take them out and show us whatever's left.
Gotcha. So where it says roll, that's kind of like it's doing the calculations for us, basically.
Yeah, it's like whatever you have left over, that's the final number.
Okay, I'm just looking at some of this other one. So what happens here? And also, what happens when it says setback blank or something blank? Does that just mean it goes bad?
Yeah, so if the die has nothing on the side, that just means that die doesn't count, good or bad for you. In real life, the dice have blank. Some of the dice have blank sides.
So that was basically a really good roll that had 2 successes.
Yeah.
And no failures.
Yeah, exactly. Even though you can see that there are 4 failure markers on there, they're canceled out by the fact that you have 6 success markers. So it evens them out. Those little triangles get thrown away, but they get thrown away along with some of your successes. And you notice on one of your green dice you have an advantage, but that's canceled out by the threat that shows up on the purple die. If you hover over any of the dice, it'll tell you what the faces mean. So you can see success and advantage, that kind of thing.
I'm just gonna throw another one in there. Okay, so what is that? So I have advantage on that.
Yeah, so that's like the last roll that you made, but it's even better because not only did you get the 2 successes, but something good happened. Maybe your opponent stumbled. Maybe you maybe you gave someone else a clear shot. You're basically creating forward momentum for your character or for the other characters in the party.
Okay, let me see if I could force a bad roll here. I'm just gonna bump it up to 6 purples.
Sure.
Yeah. So there you go.
So this is an interesting result because you've got that crit in there as well. So you've got a triumph symbol,
right?
But you've also got 4 failures and 2 threats. So this represents you have 1 success, but it's taken away by that pile of failures. You'll get some minor advantage due to the fact that you got the triumph, but the roll is still a failure, and something additionally bad still happened.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So there's a ton of information available in each die roll. Every time we roll, we're learning not only did the character succeed, but to what degree, did they create any additional advantage, did they succeed at a particular cost, and so it creates a system of fairly complex narrative roles that give us an opportunity to say a lot of different stuff about one action.
Now, in terms of when good things happen to a character, are you going to be allowing us as characters to say what that is, or will you be kind of responsible for that?
So you'll get to spend your ability points, the successes, on what you want. There are I've added some handouts to the system that you can look at that give you, especially in combat, references for things you can spend your advantage on. So if you get additional advantage, maybe you can recover strain. You can give the next person an additional boost die. You could inflict a critical injury if you have enough advantage. Perform additional maneuvers, and that's a choice you get to make. But there is a separate pool system that will allow you to make up stuff for the game kind of on the fly. That's called the Destiny Point system, and we generate a number of Destiny Points at the beginning of every session to determine whether this session has more dark side influence to begin or more light side influence, and there's an ebb and flow to those points as we play the game. So at the beginning, every player rolls a force die. It's just a plain white die that's only used by force users or at the very beginning of a session. And for each light side or dark side point that you roll on those results, we use those to create the pool. And you can spend those for upgrading your abilities. So if you're making a particularly difficult roll, and you really want to get some extra proficiency dice, or say your character doesn't know how to fly an X-Wing, but you really have to make that tough agility roll to pilot it out of the hangar, you can use the Force. Basically, you tap into the Force to help you win that roll, and it upgrades your green dice to yellow dice.
Gotcha.
I can do the same. I can do the same to make things more difficult for you. But every time either of us spends a point, we give it to the other side. So the dark side points will accumulate as you use your light side points, and then as I use the dark side points, it'll refill your pool. So we kind of go back and forth on these. But cool. The really cool thing you can do with the dark side points and the light side points, the Destiny pool, is at any point during the game, you can spend one of your Destiny points to make a lucky situation for your character, or to introduce sort of a Deus Ex Machina. So if you fall down a chasm in Cloud City and are plummeting towards your immediate death, you could say, oh, we have 1 Destiny point left. I'm going to spend this to say that there's an antenna that I can grab onto before I fall out of the cloud station, and now I can hang on. My character doesn't die. We can keep playing. And that's something that's useful for having that Destiny point around. It's a good way to get gear that you forgot to bring, or have something go right for your characters in a really bad situation.
And does that reset every session or every hour? What's the reset time on that?
We re-roll at the beginning of every session. Otherwise, it just sort of ebbs and flows back and forth between us.
And that's a one-time use per session.
Yeah. Each pool point, when spent, becomes the property of the other side. So it'll go back and forth, and there might be combats. If you watched Age of Rebellion, Sam and I went back and forth basically every round using Destiny points during that big fight.
Okay, awesome. Well, hopefully that helps. That definitely helped me in terms of the rolling and stuff like that. So that should help everyone else watching. What races are you to have available to us to use for our characters?
So the species that are available to the characters in the core book are you can play the Bothans. which we all know are master spies and dedicated to the Alliance. You can play a droid. There's a bunch of different kinds of droids you can play. You can be the Duros. They're pilots. You can play the Gran. These are I'm trying to think of a character in Star Wars that these guys are. Well, you can see them. Look it up. They're hard to describe. You can play the Gran. They're bounty hunters for the most part. You can play a human, of course. The Ithorians. They're the hammerhead aliens. You can play a Mon Calamari. This is Admiral Akbar and his people. And you can play Celestans. And the Celestans are that's a little guy that co-piloted the Millennium Falcon with Lando at the end of Jedi. Now there are other species available in Force and Destiny and in Edge of the Empire, and they're all capable of being played across each other, each system. So if somebody really wants to be something else from one of those books, we'll probably let them.
Gotcha. In terms of classes, what's going to be available to us?
So the way class works in these games is it's separated into two distinct entities. Basically, you're picking your career, and that will give you certain skills. And then your career has specializations, and there's lots of specializations. So I won't go over all of them now, but we'll talk about the different
There's
careers.
A lot, yeah.
Yeah, there's tons. There's like 5 or 6 for each career. So the careers that you can choose from are the Ace. And the Ace is just someone who is really good at a particular thing, and usually it's a vehicle-related thing. So you're an Ace pilot or an Ace driver, something like that. There's the Commander. The Commander is like a leader of troops, and they might be a squad leader in a Y-wing formation, or they might be a on-the-ground commando tactician. You can play a Diplomat. Diplomats are like Princess Leia in the first movie. They're ambassadors and quartermasters. They kind of keep the Republic running.
So not so useful in combat then?
I mean, Leia wasn't a bad shot, but they're not designed primarily for combat for sure. You can be an engineer if you want to make things go or build things. They're also good at sabotage, so they're good for making stuff explode. You can be a soldier, so sharpshooters, medics, commandos. You can play a spy. Spies are kind of your rogue class. And then for Age of Rebellion, there's a special kind of class. If you don't want to play someone who's already really established in the rebellion, you can play a recruit. And a recruit, you sacrifice specific abilities, so the kind of funneling down of all the other careers for a much broader skill set. It's kind of a build your own class. And so you can be a new recruit to the rebellion cause.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, how is experience gained, and how is it used?
Yeah, so each character is going to have something called motivation. It's why their character fights for the cause they fight for. It's built into what keeps them going. Basically, it's it's Luke's motivation early on is to avenge the death of his aunt and uncle, but he changes his motivation later to learning the ways of the Force and fighting the Empire. This is the thing that draws your character into the conflict that they're in. And you'll be rewarded experience points for playing to your motivation. You'll also earn experience points for accomplishing goals for the rebellion. So if you're given a mission to accomplish, you might get milestone goals as you pass through it, and then a bigger group of experience points at the end. And you can use those experience points to buy additional skills. You can improve your characteristics, and you can use that XP to buy additional talents on your career and specialization talent trees. These are like special tricks your character can do that nobody else is able to do.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, I guess that kind of answers everything that I would think that we need as players and that the community needs as viewers. Is there anything else that you want to cover before we call this a vid?
Well, I'd be remiss as a GM if I didn't talk a little bit about wounding and damage.
Yeah, that's true. Like, I guess how does that happen? How does that occur?
Yeah.
And how does it healed?
Yeah, so characters in Star Wars and in this universe, they tend to spend a lot of time in fights avoiding being hurt. Rather than actually like getting shot. When someone gets hurt, it's usually pretty bad. If someone gets hit with a blaster or they get struck with a lightsaber, it's a pretty significant wound. And the way that the game determines that is you have what's called a wound threshold. So whenever somebody attacks you, your defenses will help make that roll harder. So if you're wearing armor or if you're taking cover, that'll add negative dice to your enemy's pool when they try to hurt you. And if they do hurt you, if they do manage to hit you, you're going to take damage equal to the damage of the weapon plus whatever bonus successes they got, and reduce that from your wound threshold. Now, these are kind of your hit points, but not really, because once you hit 0, it doesn't mean you're dead. It just means that every hit after that is a critical. And there's a fun table that we get to roll on when you take a critical hit. And sometimes it's like a grazing wound, you're mildly distracted. Sometimes you get knocked out. Sometimes it's severe damage in some way. And those add up. And once you have enough critical wounds, then your character eventually will die. But it does create a tension, because if you roll a crit, if someone attacks and gets that triumph symbol, you skip the wound threshold completely and go right to the critical hits. So it is possible for someone to take a really strong hit on the first roll if that roll is really good.
Gotcha.
But what's cool is that the game gives the GM tools for creating characters that don't have that wound threshold, that are basically just one-shot enemies, like every Stormtrooper ever. So I can create systems where we're seeing a fight between, 4 PCs and a dozen Stormtroopers, and it's not an imbalanced fight because the Stormtroopers only have one hit apiece. Any hit on them is a crit and knocks them out.
Right.
And so it creates a very cinematic sort of combat, and then is balanced against someone who's a lot tougher, who's sort of a boss character, like a Darth Vader, for example.
Gotcha.
And so regular wound threshold will recover over time, depending on how resilient your character is. You can also use medical skills to recover it, but critical hits stick around until they get treated. So having a medic or spending some time in the back to tank will cure you of those wounds.
And in terms of like the enemies that we'll face, what is in the bestiary? Is it aliens? Are we fighting other humanoids? Like everything? Like what can people expect to see, and what can we expect to see?
Yeah, I think because the game is predominantly about the struggle between the New Republic and the remnants of the Empire, it's probably going to be a lot of sort of mano-a-mano combat. Lots of stormtroopers, Republic troops, special kinds of those troops, Imperial agents. We're also going to see probably a lot of vehicle combat. So, land speeders, AT-ATs, ATSTs, that kind of stuff. And then, of course, space combat, too. If somebody wants to play a pilot, we'll lean in that direction and probably have some space dogfighting as well. But it wouldn't surprise me if, we saw some things like Hutts or Rancors or Minox showing up in the game. Of course, Star Wars' bestiary is broad and deep.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, I think that's good. I think that was a good primer for the show. Is there anything else you want to add to it?
I don't think so. I'm really excited to jump back into the Star Wars universe and try out Balance of Power with everybody.
Awesome. All right. Well, when we know the launch date, we'll go ahead and share that with everyone. But until then, sit tight, and we'll guys let you know as soon as possible when we're going to be starting this. So thanks everyone for watching. Hopefully this helped. Make sure we'll probably have a Reddit thread or even here in the comments on YouTube. Post some questions if you guys have them, or any comments or anything like that, and me and Adam will make sure to read through those and do our best to answer them. So thanks everyone for watching. We're out. Have a good one. We'll see you later. Hopefully on RollPlay Balance of Power. I got to get used to calling it that. I haven't started calling it yet. It's not in my head. So we'll see you guys later. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye-bye.